to our Electrify Your Life webinar series. Today, we're going to be talking about electric vehicle ownership, the basics. We're going to cover the ins and outs of what day-to-day EV ownership looks like, including charging, costs, the driving range, what do EVs look like in the winter, and so much more. My name is Joanna Salinas. I am the Outreach Coordinator with the Waukesha County Green Team, and I am super excited to bring you this webinar. I am here on behalf of a group of Midwest nonprofits who are working together to bring all the education you need around electrifying your home and your transportation, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and what incentives are currently available for residents. So we have several upcoming webinars, as well as webinars on demand that you can access at www.energyevents.org. So I am super excited to welcome our presenter today, Dr. David Reichmuth, I hope I said that right, who will guide us through the types of EVs that are out there, EV ownership, benefits, considerations, incentives, and what that landscape looks like right now, and how to choose the right EV for you. So Dr. Reichmuth is the senior engineer in the Clean Transportation Program at the Union of Concerned Scientists. His work focuses on analyzing new vehicle technologies and advocating for policies that support the increased electrification of transportation. So with that, he's authored several reports and has testified at hearings before the U.S. House of Representatives, the California State Legislature, and the California Air Resources Board. So we are super excited to turn this over to Dr. Reichmuth. In the meantime, any questions that you have during this webinar, please drop them right into that little Q&A box or in the chat. Feel free to introduce yourself to everyone. And when the presentation part is done, we will have ample time for Q&A. So without further ado, welcome, Dave.
Thanks. Thank you for that introduction. So yeah, I'm going to be talking today about just the process of switching from gasoline to electricity, which is a main focus of my work at the Union of Concerned Scientists. And I just want to make sure that the slides are visible. Is that correct? Okay, great. So just before I start, I just want to give a little bit of background about Union of Concerned Scientists and also sort of why we're interested in this transition. So, Union of Concerned Scientists is over 50 years old now. Our main goal is to put science to work for a healthier planet and a safer world, especially in today's highly polarized political environment. We lead with solutions, and we want to make sure that scientific analysis, not just political calculations or corporate hype, is guiding our government's policies. And, I work in the Clean Transportation Program at UCS, and we are, the main focus of our work is moving from gasoline and diesel using fossil fuels to burning fossil fuels to electrification of transportation in the places where we can do so. And there's a couple reasons for that. One reason why we want to make the switch is air pollution. So this is a map of the fine particulate matter exposure from on-road vehicles. And you see like there's a really dark blob in Los Angeles, and that is California, and Los Angeles in particular, known for its smog from vehicles. It's the reason why some of our clean air laws exist. But it's not something that is just a problem in LA or California. The rest of the country, including the Midwest, is affected by this fine particulate matter pollution. And this is pollution that comes from nitrogen oxides, hydrocarbons, and other exhaust components that are inherent from burning gasoline or diesel. And We know that this form of air pollution has significant health effects, leading to thousands of premature deaths in the US every year and increased healthcare costs, especially from cardiovascular and lung diseases. And if we move from burning fuels, tailpipe emissions to cleaner electric vehicles, paired with cleaner electric power, we can reduce this exposure to harmful pollution. And the other main reason why we're interested in this transition is to reduce climate change. And so if you look at where in the US do greenhouse gas emissions come from, or GHG emissions, transportation is the largest sector, more than electricity, more than industry. And then if you look within transportation, passenger vehicles, the cars and trucks, SUVs, we all, or many of us drive, that is 16% of the total emissions in the US. It's the majority of transportation emissions. It's more than commercial and residential emissions combined. So if we want to address global warming and climate change, there's really no way to do it without making deep reductions in the amount of emissions coming from passenger vehicles. And electric vehicles are the primary solution for reducing those passenger vehicle emissions. So I've done a lot of research around this, looking at sort of what are the total emissions from driving an EV versus a gasoline car or truck. And I don't want to get into the details of this for this at this point, but happy to talk about this further if you want to. But the main upshot here is that if you look at the lifetime emissions, including making a battery, it's less than half the emissions when you go from a gasoline vehicle to the comparable electric vehicle. And that's based on recent electricity grid emissions. As we transition to a cleaner electric grid, those reductions are going to increase over time. So that's sort of the reasons why we're interested in making this switch. So now I'm just going to talk about the details of electric vehicles. So just want to first define what we're talking about when we talk about electric vehicles. So first of all, like conventional vehicle, I think we all know what this is. Just your average gasoline car, you go up, you refill it. That's simple. But gasoline provides 100% of the energy to move the vehicle, and there's no electric drive motor. So this is where it starts to get a little bit complicated. Like hybrids, it's like that don't plug in, like your original Toyota Prius. So it's 100% gasoline powered, but you do have an electric motor that can power at least partially the wheels. And oops, that went ahead. Power the wheels. And so you do get better fuel economy, but you're still 100% reliable on petroleum for powering the vehicle. So the next one that we can talk about is the plug-in hybrid. So this has both an electric motor that can power the vehicle and a gasoline engine. So it can plug in, but it can also refuel at a gasoline station. So after, if the vehicle hasn't been charged or you've used up the charge on the battery, this is going ahead on me without me making it go. You're going to switch to gasoline. And then the last one that we're going to talk about is the battery electric vehicle. So no gasoline engine, 100% of the power coming from grid electricity. And so we're going to be talking about, for electric vehicles, we're talking about those last two vehicles, the plug-in hybrid and the battery electric vehicle. It gets a little bit complicated because there's some companies like Toyota that are talking about the regular hybrids as electrified vehicles. But when we talk about electric vehicles in this context, we're talking about those last two things that can actually plug into the grid. So battery electric vehicle, or BEVs, plug-in hybrid vehicles, or PHEVs, are both EVs, but they're pretty different, and we need to think about them in different ways. So the battery electric vehicles are not, you shouldn't think of them as exact replacements for gasoline vehicles, because they have some really important advantages and some things that you also have to take into account. So for most battery electric vehicle owners, every day is going that if you are recharging in your garage or your driveway, every day you're going to start with a full tank, right? Most of your refueling is going to be at home. Yes, you can use public chargers, but for most people, that's going to be the exception. You're going to charge at home, and just like you plug in your cell phone at night and then you wake up and has a full charge. That's how using a battery electric vehicle is for most people is going to be. So everyday use, more convenient, right? Like you never have to go to a gas station. You never have to get oil changes. But the downside is that long distance travel is going to require more planning. You don't, if you have a gasoline vehicle, you often, unless you're going somewhere very remote, you're not thinking about where the gasoline stations are. But you probably, at least right now, you want to think about if you were taking a 1,000-mile journey, you would want to think about and plan out that trip to make sure that you can charge efficiently. But again, if you're not taking 1,000-mile trips as a part of your day-to-day lifestyle, if you're taking 10-mile trips, 30-mile, 50-mile daily driving, you're going to just come home, recharge, and have a full tank. So plug-in vehicles, it's a little bit different in that you're still going to charge at home. You don't need as fast as charging for a plug-in vehicle. The batteries for a plug-in vehicle usually can hold about the charge for about 30 miles or so of driving. And so you can get a hardwired charger, but a standard you can actually just use a portable charger for a lot of plug-in hybrid owners. So I have one here that came with my battery electric vehicle. So, it's blurring here. How do I don't know if I'd turn that off, but so this is a standard 3-prong outlet that you plug in it to in anything in your garage. As long as you're on a circuit that can handle, say, like a space heater or something like that, and can blow a fuse, you're okay. And then the other end goes into the car. This is going to give you 2 to 4 miles of range per hour. Not a lot, but if your plug-in hybrid can only hold 30 miles of range, that's an overnight charge, and you don't need really any special equipment to do that. The downside of a plug-in hybrid is that you still, if you're driving longer distances or you forget to plug in, you're going to be using gasoline, and so you still have gasoline stations as part of your life. You still have engines, you still have oil changes, and any maintenance that comes with having a gasoline engine is still there. And the other downside is that you have in general, these are going to be less efficient. When they're using electricity, they're going to be less efficient using electricity than a fully electric vehicle. And when they're using gasoline, they're probably going to be a little bit less efficient than a non-plug-in hybrid, but maybe more efficient than a conventional vehicle. But you're going to lose a little bit of efficiency because you have a vehicle that has both the weight of the gasoline powertrain and the electric powertrain. So like I said here, most of your charging for most electric vehicle owners, most of the charging is happening at home. But if you do want to charge away from the home, if you can't charge at home or you're taking a longer trip, then charging away from home becomes an issue. And so these are a map of the fast charging public stations sort of in the general upper Midwest area here. And I've shown 2 maps here. One is because there's 2 kinds of plugs right now out there for these fast chargers. And these are chargers where you would charge for between, 10 minutes and maybe 45 minutes, depending on your car and the amount of charge you need to get. The NACS is basically the Tesla plug that's on the left, and then the CCS is the plug that everyone else has been using. These are where the stations are. One important difference is the Tesla stations often have 8, sometimes 20 or more stalls. So each dot on that map represents, may represent 10 or more chargers. For the CCS, it tends to be a smaller number of chargers per location. So that's important difference there. What's not on this map is level 2 charging, which is sort of the same kind of power you would get at home. So those are much more ubiquitous, and so there's not possible to put them all on the map. Those would be a charger that would be great for if like you're going to staying overnight at a hotel and they had a charger. You plug in and charge overnight, or some place where you were going to be staying for more than an hour or more. One thing that's important about this charging away from home is that most of the auto companies now are going from the CCS connector to this NACS or Tesla style connector. So the models that are coming out from a lot of the automakers are going to that Tesla plug. So right now we have basically 2 plugs that are out there, but eventually it's all going to standardize on the NACS plug. And right now you can get adapters to go between the two. But what we are seeing is that there are more and more vehicles that are coming out slated for 2025 and 2026 that are going to come out with that Tesla port native. And this here is the Kia EV6. And sort of I've done a little blow up there of the charging port. And so this is coming with that Tesla charging port, or the NACS charging port built in. So we're going to see more and more of the newer models come with that charging port. But again, you can get adapters that go between the 2 standards. You just have to make sure you have that adapter available. So that's one big change that's happening in the EV space. But again, this is really important if you're taking those longer trips, and if you are just going, if you're just doing a 25 miles or 50 miles or even 100 miles per day, and coming back home, it really doesn't play that fast charging out, public charging doesn't play a big role. So one question that definitely comes up, especially outside of California, is questions about range, specifically about range in colder temperatures. So I've taken this graphic from a company called Recurrent that does a lot of monitoring of EVs. And one thing about the range is that, so we know that range is an important consideration for many EV buyers. And so one factor that is important is that you do get slightly lower range in hot weather, but it's not a big change. You do get significantly lower range in cold weather. So this graphic here is sort of the range loss, or sort of the range that you get in freezing temperatures versus, say, 70-degree weather. And a couple things I want to point out is it varies considerably from model to model. So if cold weather performance is really important, you need to research the specific models and see what, if there's anyone that's done reviews that include testing in cold weather to get that specific information. There is a clear trend here that vehicles that have a heat pump, which is not all EVs, but a lot of the newer EVs are coming with a heat pump, but not all of them. They are retaining more range than vehicles that don't have a heat pump, that have resistance heating. So resistance heating is just the same basic technology you would have in a space heater or a toaster. And so, whereas the heat pump is essentially, you can think about it as an air conditioner run in reverse. The heat pumps are more expensive, but they're way more efficient. And so you get lower range loss. Part of this range loss is due to the fact that the batteries are just are less efficient as they get colder. But the other big problem is that the gasoline vehicles they waste a lot of energy in the form of heat. So all that burning gasoline that gets turned into heat that you need a radiator to get rid of is also free heat to heat your inside of your car in cold weather. And when you have an electric car, it's much more efficient. You're not making waste heat. But that also means you don't have waste heat to heat up the car. And so you have to spend some of that battery energy to heat up the interior of the car. So let's see. So again, range is an important factor. I just want to point out that so if you're thinking about making a switch to EV, and if you're thinking about, well, how am I going to make a longer trip? There are a number of apps out there that can help you sort of like look at either like if you're looking at buying an EV, sort of seeing what it would mean if you had an EV and I wanted to make a long trip, or if you do have an EV, would you plan a longer trip? This is an app called A Better Route Planner, but there's a number of them. A lot of the newer EVs actually have this kind of routing built into in the car's just information system. So this is an example of taking a Hyundai Ioniq 5 from Green Bay to Chicago. It's about 209 miles. And that's almost within the range of being able to drive without charge, but this planner is suggesting spending 5 minutes charging near Milwaukee. And then if you were going to go back, you're ending up in Chicago with 13% charge. So if you had if you're staying there and you had a place to charge overnight, then you would be back to a full charge. But if you're going to return, you would probably need a longer charge on the way home, and you could plan that out. So this is all, this is the type of things you might be thinking about if you made that switch to an electric vehicle. If you made this occasional longer trips, like planning in a 5-minute stop or a 20-minute stop, depending on the length of charge, or even for some of the older vehicles, it's a 45-minute stop. But you can use these planners to look at different vehicles with different trips and figure out like, hey, how would that fit with my normal driving? Because if you're taking a 3 or 4 hour trip, at least in my family, I don't think we've ever gone on a 4-hour trip without having to make a stop for snacks or bathroom breaks or another bathroom break. And so, a 15-minute stop is going to be longer than you would normally spend at a gas station, but oftentimes you are making a longer stop anyway on a longer trip. So you can think about how those would actually practically play a role in your driving. So that's a little bit about the sort of the basic considerations. I do want to talk about the EV tax credit, because this is something that I think there's a lot of stuff happening with the EV tax credit, and that happened with the IRA. So I'm going to go through a lot of details here. I just want to preface that sort of none of this is tax advice. If you should contact an actual professional to make sure that depending on your personal tax situation, that this applies to you. But in general, there's the EV tax credit is different whether you are buying the vehicle or getting a loan for the vehicle, or if you're leasing the vehicle. It's quite a bit different. So first I'll talk about purchasing or loan. So you get the vehicle can get up to $7,500 tax credit. And that is it's a tax credit, not a deduction. So it just comes straight off your taxes. So you would get 7,500. It's non-refundable. So if you have less than 7,500 total of annual tax liability, you can't get a refund for the taxes you didn't pay. But you can get up to the amount that you paid in taxes. Half of that credit is based on where the critical materials are coming from, and half of it is where the battery components are coming from. So if it meets both the requirements, and those requirements are super complicated, I don't want to get into them right now, but you would get so you can either get half a credit or a full credit, depending on the vehicle, and I'll go over the list of those vehicles here in a second. There's an income limit, 150,000 for a single filer and 300,000 for a joint filer. There's an MSRP cap for the vehicle, $55,000 for a car, 80,000 for an SUV or truck. The dealer and seller has to file a clean vehicle report with the IRS within 3 days, and you have to get a copy of that. And then you can transfer that credit to a qualified dealer. So basically have it take the place, say, of a down payment or reduce the amount of the loan. But you still need to file with the IRS, even if you transferred the credit. The list of vehicles is on fueleconomy.gov. And it's a relatively short list of vehicles that qualify. And so these, I'm just going to go through this real quickly, but there's a Cadillac vehicle that it qualifies, the Chevy vehicles, the Blazer, the Equinox, that are out there for sale now. The F-150 Lightning, the Honda Prologue, a couple of the Jeep plug-in hybrids, and some of the Rivians, although only the ones that actually are under 80K. So most of these are actually going to be over 80K and not qualify, and they get half a credit. The 3,750. Some of the Teslas, and some of the Volkswagens will get that credit. So that's if you're buying cash, taking out a loan, and owning the vehicle. The rules for a lease are different. So when you get the EV tax credit on a lease, it's a commercial EV tax credit, not on a personal return. And it goes to the leasing company because they are the owner of the vehicle, and you're borrowing it. You're borrowing the vehicle. The credit right now is 7,500, but it's tied to an analysis of the cost difference between EVs and conventional vehicles. So it's 7,500 for calendar year 2024. We don't know what that number will be for 2025. The Department of Energy is supposed to put out guidance before the end of this year, and I looked last night and I did not see an update yet. But that will be coming out presumably in the next few weeks. And it could be possible that the 2025 leasing credit would be lower than 7,500. It can't be higher than 7,500. The important thing for a lease is there's no income cap. There's no MSRP cap. There's no restriction on where the materials come from. So most EVs are going to qualify. Most buyers are going to qualify for this EV credit on the lease. The one thing that's important is that the credit is going to the leasing company, and they can pass through the credit. They can advertise that you're getting 7,500 off. That's not a requirement. If they wish, they could take. If they don't want to advertise that you're getting it, they could just take it. Or they could take part of it. But most of them are passing it on. And it's usually passed on through inflating the residual value of the vehicle. So it'll still say it costs this, if it's a $40,000 vehicle, it'll still say $40,000 is the transaction price, but that the value after the 2 or 3 year lease is up will be inflated by that 7,500. But the math gets a little more complicated with the leases. So a lot of questions I've had lately are sort of, well, what's going to happen with the election? Like, so what's going to happen with the tax credits in 2025 or after January? So the EV credits are part of the IRA, and it would require legislation to actually modify or repeal them. So they really can't go away on day one of a Trump presidency. And just looking on the EV tax credits, it's a complicated picture because I bring up this guy here. This is Buddy Carter. He represents the 1st District in Georgia, a very Republican district. He sits on the Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Environment, Manufacturing, and Critical Materials. So very much area that would be, that covers the EV tax credit. But this here is a new Hyundai giant manufacturing facility that is going into his district. Is going to support about 15,000 jobs in that corner of Georgia. They're going to make this new EV Hyundai Ioniq 9. So it's, he was one of the legislators that wrote a letter to Speaker Johnson saying to leave the IRA tax credits alone. And we know that the margin in the House is lower than 18. And so will the tax credits get repealed, in a standalone legislation or the IRA? That's not clear. We don't know, but it might not be a simple process. But what we do know is that the broader tax code changes could imperil the EV tax credit. So there's the reconciliation process. There's sort of a lot of other tax code changes that are happening in the IRA. These EV tax credits could become part of that, those deals that are made. I don't know what's going to happen with that. I don't think anyone really knows. The other thing to think about is that the implementation of the credits could reduce the availability. So depending on how, if a new leadership in the Department of Energy or the Department of Treasury changes sort of the calculations of how those material requirements are calculated, that could reduce that list of vehicles that get the tax credit, or make it more onerous to get that tax credit. And the lease credit could be lowered if they change the assessment of EV costs. So big picture, it's not going to go away. The EV tax credits aren't going to go away immediately, but there are definitely concerns over the either becoming more restrictive or going away completely as, during a Trump presidency. So if this tax credit is super important to your buying decision, the sooner you make that decision, the better off you're probably going to be in terms of getting that tax credit. Just before I wrap up, I just want to say a few things about what's next for EVs, just what you can be thinking about beyond the tax credit. The first thing is that we are going to probably see more plug-in hybrids, including what some manufacturers are calling EREVs, extended range EVs. These are plug-in hybrids with bigger batteries. And this is one for a Ram. This is the chassis here and powertrain for a Ram plug-in hybrid pickup truck. And so you have a big V6 engine here, but it's not actually connected to the wheels. It's just going to operate as a generator to recharge this bigger battery pack that is sitting here in the middle of the vehicle. So we may see more plug-in hybrids over the next couple of years that maybe have bigger batteries and drive more like a battery electric vehicle, as the gasoline engine only being used as a generator. So that's something we might see on the technical side. One thing we are definitely seeing is bigger EVs. So this is the Ioniq 9 from Hyundai. This is a 3-row, 6-passenger SUV, really pretty massive vehicle. And this is the VW Buzz, like electric minivan kind of, harkening back to their like old VW bus. The point here is, I mean, we're going to see bigger vehicles. We're also going to see more vehicles, I think, that break out of the sort of hatchback crossover EV SUV style that a lot of the EVs sort of fit into that, look very similar at this point. And I think we're starting to see manufacturers kind of try to put EVs into different vehicles so that they have a differentiation. And then, the other thing is that we may see lower cost EVs on the horizon. So this is the Volvo XC30, which was supposed to be a 200 plus range model that under like mid 30,000s. It's now caught up in some tariff issues, but the Equinox here, their base model at Equinox, it's not out yet, but it will be coming out with a basically a 35,000 price point, and then right now you would be able to get that tax credit on it, taking it effectively under 30K, and which doesn't maybe sound cheap if you haven't been shopping for cars lately. That doesn't sound cheap, but there actually are very few cars now, new cars that you can get below 30K. Even even a Honda Civic is going to be like starting at like 25K. So, these are something that we hope to see as these sort of lower cost EVs, and especially if we can retain the tax credit, really have those be an easier way for people to get into an EV that is more affordable and really sort of from the start cheaper than a gasoline vehicle. So just wrap up here. When I think about like sort of like what car should you buy for your next car, here's my recommendations. One is that first, if you're looking at a car, first, do you need a new car? That's the first thing to look at. Like the way that we like, a lot of us need a personal transportation for just sort of our lifestyle, but especially post-pandemic, some of our needs have changed, and especially if you have a 2 or 3 car household, do you need to get another vehicle, or can you replace some of those miles with walking or biking or public transit or other modes? But if you do need a vehicle, really consider an electric car over a gasoline vehicle, especially if you have more means and so the price point is not as important. If you're already looking in the luxury range for a gasoline vehicle, and then if you have the ability to charge at home, that makes it a lot easier choice to make. And regardless of if you choose a electric or gasoline, if you choose the most efficient vehicle that meets your transportation needs, oh, there's a word missing, transportation needs, it's going to be lower fueling costs. It's going to be lower emissions. And for an electric vehicle, the more efficient it is means that you will get the same amount of range with a smaller battery, which is going to mean usually less cost for that vehicle. So whether you pick gasoline or electric, sort of choosing that more efficient vehicle is going to be better for the environment and save you money. And so with that, I just sort of like to thank you for your attention. And I think we have time for questions now, Joanna.
We do. Thank you. This was so fascinating and interesting. I jotted down a couple questions, and I know there are quite a few questions in the Q&A and the chat. I do want to give a quick shout out and thank Andrew Butts, who's been in the chat answering some of the questions. Andrew is the founder of Green Neighbor Challenge, and for anyone interested in efficiency and electrification and all the answer to all these questions, check out that website. You type in your zip code and it pops up all the incentives available for you. So a couple of quick questions. The app that you showed with the trip from Green Bay to Chicago, what was the name of that again? I'm sorry, I might have missed it.
It's a better route planner, and I think it's abbreviated ABRP.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah, not super, but there's I think there's another I got the charging station locations from another website, Plug Share.
Okay.
And that's I think they also have a routing option, and then a lot of the vehicles themselves have that routing as part of their navigation in the car.
Excellent. Thank you. Could you clarify real quick? Okay, so EV charging at home, I know we saw the plug-in that
Yeah.
you had there. For all electric vehicles, are there special chargers that you need to install in your home?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I mean, you can use the charger. I showed that it just plugs into a standard outlet. You're only going to get roughly 2 to 4 miles of range per hour. But there actually are people that even for a fully electric vehicle are using that. Like if your daily trip is 5 or 10 miles, and that's all you're going, then you could even use that slow charging overnight and you'd be fine, and then use a public charger for longer trips. But for a lot of people that want to go longer distances with a fully electric car, they're going to want a level 2 charger, which is going to be, most of the time, this is a hardwired 240 volt circuit, that dedicated circuit for that. So it's sort of the same sort of circuit you would need for like a clothes dryer or maybe an electric oven. And so you want that. And that's going to give you more like, well, it depends on the circuit, but now we're talking like 10, 20, 30 miles per hour of charge being replaced. I mean, of range being replaced. Now, a lot of the car companies, to be fairly honest, have been we're in this mode of like, hey, we provide the car, and it's up to you to figure out how to charge it. We're seeing more of the car companies sort of be better at trying to sell EVs, and that also giving people the information and about how to charge. And Ford a few months ago rolled out their I'm trying to remember their branding. I think it's called like the Ford Power Promise or something. Right now, if you get a Ford, they're doing the sorry, I just got an earthquake loading on.
Oh.
Okay, it's not me. So the Ford Power Promise, they are covering the cost of a standard installation and the charger for your home. So with a new Ford EV. So that's something different, sort of like they're actually going to like cover that installation, help you make that happen.
Excellent. Could you touch on the tax incentives with used vehicles? Are there tax incentives for used vehicles?
There are tax incentives for used vehicles. They are more restrictive than the ones for the new vehicles. There is an income cap and it's lower. There are restrictions on the um, on the price of the vehicle, and it has to be the first resale of the vehicle. It has to be bought from a dealer, not from a private party. So in practice, there are just going to be fewer used vehicles that qualify for that and fewer buyers that qualify for that. But it does exist. I believe it's up to $4,000 for a used EV, but it's more difficult to find vehicles that qualify and find a seller that qualifies. You can't just, oh yeah. Sorry, we just had a little earthquake here. Okay.
Yeah, Dave is in California, if I didn't mention that.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah,
us in
there's
the
a
Midwest,
chandelier here that is now swinging back and forth.
listen,
So
if you need to go, we can end now.
no, it's right now it's fairly minor. So
Okay. All right, thanks. Um, Real quick, going back to that EV infrastructure at the home, the hardwired chargers, do any of the tax credits apply to those?
oh, that's a good question, and I am not to date on exactly what the parameters are around that. Um there is an EV charging credit. I don't have that information at the top of my at my
Okay.
fingertips right now.
All right.
But I
Andrew,
will say for the also, but they're also um for both the purchase and the and things like the charging. You can also look at state and local incentives. Sometimes utility districts have incentives. Not everywhere, and I mean, obviously, I don't know what's available in the Midwest, but there are, besides the federal incentives, there are sometimes state or local incentives that you should look into.
okay. And Andrew just dropped a link in the chat. So for to look to see who qualifies. He says yes, but it's tricky to qualify. Sometimes it depends on your census district. So definitely check out that link from Andrew there. All right, so a couple other questions from folks, and some of these you have already covered. There was a question about the incoming administration and changes. So I believe you covered that pretty much in depth. But if I skip over any of these questions and you still want more clarification, please just hop in the chat and let me know. And I believe you touched on this too, but it was, will GM, Ford, and Kia Hyundai be able to use the Tesla chargers? So I think you touched on kind of those up and coming
Yeah,
models.
I think one thing I should point out is that sort of like they're all going to they're all, I think most of the major automakers have announced a switch eventually to that different plug. The access to there's having the plug or having the adapter, and then there's having the access to the network, which does require sort of Tesla to sort of allow the vehicle to be on the network. So there is also a part where, like, does the manufacturer and Tesla have that business relationship in place? So there is a step beyond just sort of, does the plug fit into the car? Is that um is Tesla supporting that vehicle on its network?
Okay.
And so that is something you do need to look at for the specific automaker and the Tesla.
Okay. And then I think we have time maybe for these two last questions here. Okay, so this one is, can a conventional electric heater be replaced by a heat pump heater? So for a 2017 Chevy Bolt, electric vehicle, for example, um, can that heater be replaced by a heat pump? And is that something that you think a dealer would do, or do you need to find a private place to do
Uh,
that?
I mean, that is the exact car I have, and no, there's um no, there's really no way to retrofit. I mean, I'm sure if you were handy enough and interested enough, you could probably find a way to rebuild your car.
Okay.
Oh,
All
sorry.
right.
All right, sorry. I don't know how
Shoot.
to make that stop. That's a tsunami warning. So,
Oh, no.
but
Okay.
I'm not in a tsunami zone. So,
Okay. Oh,
um,
my. These are things
uh,
we don't worry about in the Midwest. It's just below
no,
zero today.
yeah. So sorry. So there's really no way to rebuild the car around a heat pump. Um, so you're kind of whatever it has when it came off the assembly line is pretty much what you're gonna get. So for the Bolt, your option is to run the heater and take that range loss, or I guess bundle up very.
Yeah.
But
It,
even part of it is also just sort of you're going to lose that there is also a resistance heater for the battery, because it does need to heat up the battery if it gets too cold. And so that's also part of like the heat pump for those newer vehicles that have a heat pump. That heat pump is going to be used to be more efficient in heating the cabin for sure, but also more efficient in heating the battery, and keeping the battery um, in the proper temperature zone.
okay. All right. And then, oh, and Joe also pointed out with that 2017 Chevy Bolt that he used the Tesla app for the first time yesterday, and it worked. So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean we didn't really talk about this detail. The charging is that that some of the vehicles like the Hyundais and the Kias have the ability, and some of the VW Audis also have the ability to do really quick fast charging. So as fast as a Tesla or faster, if they go to the highest power public chargers. So you can talking about like for some of the quickest Kias and Hyundais, you're talking about going from 20% charge to 80% charge in less than 20 minutes. So really quick charging. For the Bolt, which is an older vehicle, mine is 2017. It can use now you can use the Tesla chargers, but it's limited to its fast charging is slower than a Tesla. So you're still going to have that. It's not going to charge as fast as some of the newer vehicles, even if it has access to the Tesla charger. The Tesla charger can put out more power, but the Bolt can't receive it.
David.
And so that's just one caveat, is that even if you have access to Tesla's faster chargers, you might not get, especially for the older vehicles, you might not get that full
Okay.
speed.
Yeah. Okay, and then the last couple of questions all are around batteries.
Okay.
So, and I'll give you both these questions and then you can comment on them. So one was just a question on sodium ion batteries with a question mark, like maybe wanting you to comment on that. The other um, was it seems as there are a few different batteries on the horizons that might have much greater range. Excuse me. And they're wondering if it makes more sense then to lease versus buy in that regards. And then also I personally had a question of around batteries and kind of these tariff wars that we might be seeing. Is that going to have an impact then on the EV market going forward? So,
Yeah. So there's a couple of questions wrapped in there. Let me just take
mhm,
one on sort of like what are the batteries made of and what's happening there. So right now, all the batteries in EVs are lithium ion batteries. There's a couple of right now there's two major types. There's there's ones that use that are called NCM, nickel, cobalt, manganese. They have different those metals in different proportions, and then ones that are lithium iron phosphate. The lithium iron phosphate are cheaper. They're not quite as energy dense, so the range is lower. But especially for some of the lower price point vehicles, that's some of the manufacturers are going to that type battery. There are other newer battery technologies, like sort of moving from lithium to sodium to try to reduce the costs of the battery. That sodium is obviously easier to get than lithium. Moving from the current technology to solid state batteries, which would have some advantages as well. Those are things that could play a role in maybe sort of maybe 5 years from now. It's just a very long time period between going from when something is sort of in the lab or even available in sort of small format to being tested and verified that it will work in the automotive setting. Because if you think about batteries in a vehicle, there's a wide temperature range that they have to be able to operate on. They have to operate for, a long period of time without degrading significantly, be able to handle vibration and sort of physical abuse. And so there is that testing, but that takes time for it to move from that sort of from the laboratory to the actual vehicle. And so it won't be quick to ramp up the manufacturing of those and the validation of those. And then I'm sorry, the second part of the question was around the leasing, I think.
Yeah, leasing versus buying then if you're waiting for new battery technology.
Yeah. So that is an important consideration, is that if you lease the vehicle, and technology changes, whether it's the charging port or the battery or any other part of the technology changes over those 3 years, you're giving that vehicle back at the end of 3 years, or you have the option to give it back at the end of 3 years. And then you could change to a newer vehicle. I mean, that is, aside from the tax credit advantages right now for leasing versus buying, that is a reason why you might think of leasing, especially with with cars that are changing so much in a relatively short amount of time. In general, leasing a gasoline vehicle is usually a bad financial decision, but leasing an EV can be really, there's a lot of other factors that make that a better choice. The only caveat would be is that you would be then 3 years from now looking at needing to lease another vehicle or buy another vehicle, and so you have to take into account, like, well, what will be the conditions in 3 years, and what is that, do you want to be looking for a vehicle in 3 years, or do you just want to get something now that you're comfortable with and go with that. But right now, I think there is probably, for a lot of the vehicles, because of the way, especially for the vehicles that can't qualify for the purchase EV tax credit, the leasing is just going to be a better option. But it really depends on, it depends on the finance criteria and sort of your personal financial situation. So I can't say that as a blanket, but it really is something where you really should look at the lease deal as the lease options as potentially a cheaper way to get into the vehicle, and also then not worrying about the technology changing.
Excellent. All right, well, with that, we are at time. So I am so very appreciative to you, David, for spending an hour with us today and sharing your wisdom. And I want to thank all of our attendees who are watching this at home. Reminder that there are lots of webinars on demand at energyevents.org that you can check out, our past ones or our upcoming schedules. So, all right, with that, I want to thank everyone, and I hope you have a good day, and I hope there are no more earthquakes or tsunamis, David.
I hope so.